Hi, Vidya. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Oh, yes. I thought I was speaking, but I didn't realize I was muted. So thank you, Ryan. Welcome to this press conference by the NGO Forum on ADB and all its constituent members. It's that time of year again when we need to come back before the press. Um, we speak up for the communities that are part of our group. And we have several experts today who have engaged with a lot of hope with the process that was this entire relooking at the energy policy of the ADB. You know, we had an outdated policy from 2009 that was not working too well on the ground. Communities and our environment were really hit badly by it. It was not Paris aligned. And therefore, even the ADB, based on their internal evaluation department, telling them squarely to do so, began looking at their entire energy policy. We had a draft energy policy come out. All of us actually engaged with the bank on it. We had several meetings that the ADB likes to position as their grand public consultation. It went on, and we had many parleys with the bank on this. We had with the Department of STCC. What is the STCC called? It's called the Climate Change. Oh, give me a minute. I'm still not here. It's the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, of course. We spoke to the director, Yongping Zai. We spoke to Bruce Dunn from the Safeguards Department of the same, and there were so many discussions. And we were hopeful that we are being listened to. We also came before the press time and again to tell you what was happening, to share our perspective on enhancing ambition, really, on climate in the Asia Pacific region. And there were many statements that we shared with you. And here we are feeling compelled to come back to you because really what we are discovering is that the accelerated, rapid fossil fuel phase out that we are expecting, the decarbonizing of Asian economies, and really the halt to ecosystem destruction and the destruction of lives and livelihoods that the older energy policy brought about is not going away. I mean, this is our expectation, right? Rapid fossil fuel phase out. And we are not sure that this version of the energy policy that will make its way as the energy policy that the bank will keep to for the next 5 years is actually fit for purpose. This is very worrying, and that's why several of us from across the region have come together. Remember, the ADB is actually positioning itself and preening about being Asia and the Pacific climate bank. So they are saying that they are the climate bank of the region, and we are saying we're not so sure. And some of them will tell us, oh, but this energy policy will be relooked at in 5 years' time. Why are you getting so upset? But we are upset because 5 years is really a long time for communities and the ecosystem, and we know that there is no time but now. So we've been through what they call the working paper that they brought out again, and there were key stakeholder consultations on that. Then there was the R paper that we all responded to. The R paper went to the board. The working paper, sorry, went to the board, and the R paper is out. And this is where we come back to you because the board consideration of the proposed new energy policy after the R paper, which is the last version that we have out, is now on the 20th of October. So we are really coming to you a week before to appeal to you to carry our voices forward. Because clearly the ADB has not listened, even on foundational basic things like translations in the major Asian languages. They haven't come up with even that foundational ask being kept to. There are a lot of things that we find are not fit for purpose, and our stellar lineup of activists who engage on policy issues also will take you through that. We have Avril from SEED in the Philippines. We have Hassan Mehdi from Bangladesh. We have Liddy Naktil from the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development. We have Himanta Vithanage from the Center of Environmental Justice, and also Friends of the Earth International. We have Titi Sontero from AXI in Indonesia. We have Tanya Lee Roberts, who is the energy campaigner of the NGO Forum on ADB. We have Ikram Mamadov from the Youth Group to Protect the Environment. And from Central Asia, we have Yobel Novian Putra from Indonesia and Gaia. We have Toshi Doi from Mekong Watch. We have, of course, Ryan Hassan, who's the executive director of the NGO Forum on ADB. And I'm Vidya Dinkar. I am the president of the Indian Social Action Forum, and I represent Growth Watch in India. We are keen to bring all our points to you. All of us have something to say on different aspects of this now virtually finalized energy policy draft. We are appealing to you to carry what we say, because the board of directors sits within a week, and we need the board of directors to actually go back to the drawing board, not just pass this through, but rethink basis what we are saying, which is what communities on the ground who have engaged with the ADB, who have really, in good faith, engaged with the ADB and with several directors of the board also over the last 2 years or so on this. We need them to listen and think again before signing on the dotted line, in a way. So we'll jump right away into our first speaker, who's from the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development, SEED, based in the Philippines. SEED has done a lot of work looking at ADB's energy policy. Avril de Torres will be representing SEED. She is the head of the Research Policy and Law Program of the Center, and she leads action researches and policy engagements, manages strategic legal interventions to advance transformative energy, ecological justice, and people-centered development. SEED, most importantly for us, authored the paper Leaving Behind ADB's Dirty Energy Legacy, which was published with the NGO Forum on the ADB. Avril, let's hear what you have to say to the ADB through our friends in the press. Yes.
Thank you, Vidya, and good day to everyone. It has been over a decade that the ADB has been guided by the 2009 energy policy, as Vidya said. And this policy was in many ways crucial in catapulting developing Asia to fossil fuel dependence and the world to exacerbating climate change. In a matter of days, the ADB board is scheduled to consider a new policy, finally. And this comes just a few weeks ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, where several countries are being called to consign coal to history. It's quite evident, however, that the final version of ADB's proposed energy policy sets up the bank to maintain its dirty energy legacy and to consign not coal to history, but climate vulnerable communities in Asia Pacific to catastrophe. The energy policy review, it had a promising start with the long overdue declaration of a no coal policy. And yet this final version, it remained vague on how to prevent coal financing to slip through in financial intermediaries, on allowing coal plants to be re-engineered to use fossil gas, and on decarbonization targets for industrial processes that directly use coal. Ultimately, the final draft ignores both the latest climate science and the worsening plight of vulnerable people. Despite the IPCC's harrowing sixth assessment report, which recognizes the significant role of methane in driving climate change, the ADB's proposed policy now sets in stone that fossil gas supposedly has a necessary role in the transition. And this ignores that its members have unique and different circumstances in their decarbonization pathways. And while it says that its support for fossil gas is selective, this policy should be called out as it is. Ultimately, it leaves the door open for fossil fuels, enough for its member countries to first miss their climate targets, and second, to lose the next climate battle, and that is to stop fossil gas expansion in Asia. The Philippines alone is confronted with massive plans for fossil gas, including over 19 gigawatts of capacity in the pipeline, and without an energy transition plan in place. So this policy, it should also be weighed against ADB's commitments to poverty alleviation and universal access to energy as a public bank. Coal, oil, and fossil gas prices are in record highs across Asia today. And this impacts not only businesses and investments, but most importantly, communities who are already struggling to recover from a long-drawn pandemic. In fact, here in the Philippines and fossil fuel-dependent Philippines, consumers are objecting to another electricity price hike for the 7th month in a row from the biggest power distribution utility. And transport groups are seeking fair hikes amidst rising oil prices. ADB is setting up the Philippines and other DMCs for a continuation of this trajectory, when it should be adopting no less than the greatest climate ambition and extending no less than the maximum support for renewable energy development, demonstration, and commercialization, especially for hard to decarbonize sectors like industrial processes, heating, cooling, cooking, and last mile electrification. So these critical provisions of full support for renewable energy are unacceptably lacking, but so evidently present in false solutions like CCUS. We are sounding like a broken record here with our specific goals and climate non-negotiables, but we will not tire from saying this because ADB so far has not listened, despite our rigorous interventions over the past couple of months. So in this tail end of the review process, we call on ADB's leadership to reject the proposed energy policy as it reads today, because it is so clearly deaf as the climate code read. The bank has to go back to the drawing board, and we demand for a genuinely transformative and 1.5 aligned energy policy. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, very clearly said, go back to the drawing board. This is unacceptable. And so, as we said before, 1 week before the ADB's Board of Directors deliberates on the new proposed 2021 energy policy, it's civil society organizations from East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Central Asia who've come together today to denounce this policy and not accept it because it fails on climate science, it fails our communities and our ecosystem. And it's just unacceptable right now because it even fails the Paris goals. Our next speaker is someone who has been watching the ADB and their policies and their projects on the ground. Today, he's also the chairperson of the NGO Task Force on ADB, chair of the International Committee, that is. Hassan Mehdi is a human rights and environmental activist who is the chief executive of CLEAN, a coastal livelihood and environmental action network based in Khulna in Bangladesh, which is right next to the Sundarban. His sector of work is climate change, mangrove forest and biodiversity, environmental education, and agriculture. He is a member secretary of the Bangladesh Working Group on External Debt, which is a civil society platform working on mega projects financed by bilateral and multilateral financial institutions. They don't as much work on them as soundly denounce them. So Hassan Mehdi, what is your response from the Bangladesh perspective and the South Asia perspective on this to be passed policy?
Thank you very much, Vidya. Thank you. From South Asia, we demanded a deadline for financing fossil fuels from the very beginning. Whatever the date before 2050, but still there is no deadline. So still ADB is trying to promote fossil fuel as a never-ending process. So far we understand. The ADB has recently taken an initiative of the so-called energy transition mechanism, ETM. They said that the high-emitting fossil fuel like coal-based power plants will be retired early through this process. But we found that only the big polluting financiers and companies will get financial benefits through the process. Besides, when the government like Bangladesh government has signed a power purchase agreement with any companies for long term, like 25 years, with an option of obligatory capacity payment, this mechanism will not work. The energy policy still has all options of investing for fossil fuel industries with some conditionalities, of course. But those conditionalities will not be able to stop ADB from investing in fossil fuel power plants in any way. So the energy policy will be used as a clean sheet for all types of energy investments. As a Bangladeshi, from Bangladesh, a country which has experiencing serious overcapacity in the power sector, the country has to pay more than $1.5 billion per year for the idle power plants. And that, if you understand that the amount is larger than the country's expenditure in health sector. So this picture couldn't stop ADB from investing another $1 billion for 2 gigawatt LNG-based power plants. So how can we believe that these conditionalities in the energy policy will stop ADB from investing dirty fossil fuels in different countries like Bangladesh, India, and Indonesia, Cambodia, and all the developing countries in Asia? So I don't believe that this energy policy, which doesn't have a direct bar, will be able to stop ADB from financing more in fossil fuel. Therefore, as the South Asian representatives, we are not accepting this energy policy as a people and environment friendly and also a climate responsive policy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hassan Mehdi, for that very clear call out to the bank. I think it's also important to recognize that they haven't come clean on what their gas guidance notes are. And therefore, this is something that we have been demanding from the working paper onto the our paper, but we don't see it. All the guidance notes is what we've been pushing for, because if we do not know how the staff of the ADB will be taking decisions, what the parameters are going to be, how do we even know what's in store for us? And countries like Bangladesh that are climate vulnerable are especially worried. I will move now to somebody who's been a strident voice from the region. Liddy Nakpil is the coordinator of the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, which is based in the Philippines. She's chairperson of Oriang Women's Movement Philippines and the vice president of the Freedom from Debt Coalition in the Philippines. She's a member of the coordinating committee of the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice and convener of the Asian Energy Network, also a member of the facilitation committee of the Fight Inequality Alliance Asia.
I hope everyone is okay. I want to.
Shall we? Yes. Thank you, Jen. So Liddy, over to you.
Yes. So Vidya, I'd first like to refer to this announcement that we woke up to by the ADB that is going to scale up its climate finance by up to $100 billion by 2030. So this was a major announcement just, I think, yesterday, or was it today? And we'd like to say that with this energy policy, whatever good intentions they have with their climate finance to address climate change and support climate action is going to be severely, if not completely, eroded by this energy policy, because as our colleagues have already spoken, the energy policy is not completely a fossil fuel free policy. The ADB will continue to finance fossil fuel projects, albeit under certain conditions. But these conditions are worded in such a way that it still gives a large scope for supporting fossil fuels in the region. And I'd like to focus on the gas provisions, the gas financing provisions of this new policy, which we've already actually in much greater detail debunked, still allowing for and supporting for the buildup of gas in the region, which also the previous speakers have already mentioned. Just to recall some of the important details of this, the ADB is promising it will not finance upstream gas, which means exploration and drilling, but it will continue to finance midstream and downstream gas under certain conditions. And these conditions gives it, as I said, a lot of leeway, because while it has this general wording that this will be under conditions which will be consistent with the Paris Agreement, which will not lock in unreasonably into polluting energy. There are also other wording in the guidelines which actually refers to exceptions that are far-reaching. Natural gas investments, for instance, they say may be supported if they serve space heating, cooling, domestic demand, industrial energy applications. These are wide-ranging use of gas or distributed electricity generation to improve energy access. This really should give us serious pause, because so what will they not fund in terms of natural gas and in terms of midstream and downstream gas? We think that saying they will not fund upstream gas and oil is kind of like a washing of hands or trying to appear clean, because it's not going to go into drilling and exploration directly. But if they're going to finance the expansion of midstream and downstream, that is indirectly supporting the expansion of upstream, because if you're expanding demand, you are also indirectly encouraging the expansion of supply, because what will the midstream and downstream projects use, new projects, if you're not assuming that the supply will also be expanded? So these are really very serious concerns on our part about its so-called exceptions on gas support. I mean, there's a number of other problems with the new energy policy, which our colleagues will expound on. And this, as I said at the beginning, this energy policy is just going to completely erode whatever good that they want to do with the climate finance. And then the climate finance purposes is also subject to a lot of, questions on our end that we all share here, I'm sure, across civil society, because the ADB has not had a good track record of defining clearly and acceptably, in an acceptable way, what is clean development, what is climate-friendly development. It has so many exceptions, it has so many assumptions that are quite problematic in terms of what is clean energy, for instance. That includes very destructive mega dams, which its track record is riddled with, And I'm sure other colleagues will have a lot of things to say. So this should, you know, really gives us further reason to very strongly protest and resist this new energy policy. Thank you, Vidya.
Thank you, Liddy. Yes, we need to resist this new energy policy, not just because they're using the Trojan horse technique in a way for fossil gas, but there are so many problems with the whole policy that we will hear thereafter. There's next on, we have somebody who has been really monitoring the ADB from up close over the years for about 30 years. So really, ADB is the most familiar with him. And today he is actually the chairperson of the Friends of the Earth International. Himanta Vithanage is the executive director and co-founder of Sri Lanka-based Center for Environmental Justice. He's also, he has been the international convener of the NGO Forum on ADB. He was the former executive director of the NGO Forum on ADB and also of Environmental Foundation from 2010 to 2018. He has been an executive committee member of Friends of the Earth International, which is the largest environmental justice movement in the world. Today, he is chair of Friends of the Earth International. Himanta, you have been closely looking at the ADB and how they have viewed policy. You've grappled with the 2009 policy. Here, we've all collectively grappled with what they are trying to put forth before us as the new climate-aligned policy. Do you think it's worth the paper it is on?
Thank you, Vidya. I think I'm also interested to learn that ADB is going to spend about 100 billion from 2019 to 2030, and they're going to call it as a climate bank. But in my experience, when we started monitoring the Asian Development Bank around 1990, so it's all about energy, and ADB was spending so much money for fossil fuel, especially the coal power, and we have so many cases, so many incidents coming from various countries, especially the countries like Thailand. There's a coal power plant called Memo Coal Power Plant, which actually contributed a lot of deaths in that area. In 2007, so we have submitted 300 death certificates from Thailand to the Asian Development Bank during its annual meeting, 40th annual meeting held in Japan. So ADB has a lot of historical contribution to the climate change, and also ADB has been putting a lot of money into the other very climate disastrous fossil, including natural gas and waste to energy, etc. But in this particular, the new draft, there's some sections talking about that ADB will not support natural gas exploration. But at the same time, on the same paragraph, they say ADB may finance investment in natural gas infrastructure, including gas, T&D pipelines, LNG terminals, and storage facilities, natural gas-based end-use facilities, then go on. So when we had almost like 50 years fight, more than 30 years fight against the ADB on the fossil fuel, and very recently in last May, this May in 2021, they announced that they will not support any coal power. Even in this particular the energy policy, they are mentioning that they are not going to support coal power. But similarly, natural gas is another very bad fossil fuel, which is not a transition gas, transition energy source in our mind, because the world is already facing a lot of climate disasters. And according to the World Bank, at least by 2050, they are expecting more than 216 million people will become the climate refugees. Now, these are huge numbers. The same ADB member countries, developing member countries, are facing these kind of disasters. And among the top 10 climate impacted countries in the world, 6 of them are coming from Asia. And Sri Lanka is number 2 in 2017. Sri Lanka is again number 6 in 2018. Philippines, Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, and all these countries are heavily impacted by climate change. So when you want to spend money for climate rehabilitation, climate mitigation, etc., why you still contribute to the climate disasters? So that is the question we want to ask from the Asian Development Bank. So we think that ADB's role should be supporting, reducing, mitigating climate change. At the same time, there will be so many people are going to lose jobs, livelihoods, and the ADB has the responsibility to support those who are going to lose their livelihood, as well as the just transition is going to create a lot of job issues, and the ADB has to put money into those ones. So I think we believe that we urgently need to invest on locally appropriate, climate safe, affordable, and low impact energy for all, and reduce energy dependence so that the people don't need much energy to meet their basic needs and live in a good life. So I think that is one of the fundamental things. You cannot just put so much of money into energy generation through the dams and various green, so-called green renewables, because we know there are a lot of mini hydro projects that are very, very destructive. In my country, they are killing all the biodiversity. So not all renewables are good energy. So we have to understand that. So we cannot push continuously unended renewable power, because renewable power also has a lot of impact. In fact, one of the projects ADB supported in Sri Lanka, we had to fight, and we were able to bring an emergency radar shutdown system for those that wind power to stop the bird deaths, which they are coming from Siberia, European countries, through India to Sri Lanka, through Adams Beach. And they were expecting at least about 10 pelican deaths because of this particular project, unless there was an emergency shutdown. So I think the green energy which they are going to support are also not 100% green energy. So we have to be very careful. What is good energy? What is bad energy? I think that is what Friends of the Earth is also pushing. So I think we have to support only the good energy sources. And we think that this particular, the R paper doesn't bring that much understanding, and they are still supporting renewables, bad renewables, as also they're supporting fossil, including waste to energy and natural gas. So I think it has to, as Avril mentioned, it has to go back to the drawing board, and we request all the ADB board members don't approve this project without listening to the public. So we are the one finally affected, and we are living on the ground, and our communities are not able to face these climate disasters. So therefore ADB has the responsibility to respond to their historical contribution, as well as completely remove all sort of fossil fuel from this energy policy. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Hemanta. Thank you. And in fact, this new report which came out in September 2021 about where the ADB's own independent evaluation department supported what you were saying, Hemanta. They asked that the ADB puts out clear steps on how they will support developing member countries to transition away from fossil fuels and super pollutants. So we echo what you're saying. ADB take responsibility, no more funding of climate disasters, and it's not just the financial risk that such projects pose, but the risks and impacts both on the environment and our communities that we are worried about. Hemanta spoke of low impact energy. solution as the way forward. I'll call upon our next speaker to also talk how the ADB approaches this. How does the ADB look at energy solutions that we think are often false solutions? But Titi Sontero, who is the executive director of AXI for Gender, Social and Ecological Justice in Indonesia, will tell us more. Her main focus is on mainstreaming women's rights and gender considerations into policies and projects related to safeguards, information disclosure, participation, and the accountability mechanism of international financial institutions, especially focused on climate change financing and the Green Climate Fund in Indonesia and beyond. Titi Sontero.
Thank you, Vidya. But before I go to discuss about the ADB energy policy related to the women, first of all, I would like to condemn the promotion of geothermal in the new ADB energy policy. This promotion is a real threat for people in volcanic countries like Indonesia, a country with a lot of volcanoes, for example, that are targeted heavily for geothermal extraction. During the consultation, we provide a lot of information about the suffering of people and environmental destruction from this geothermal extraction. So ADB again disrespects the suffering of the peoples and environment from geothermal. So there are many aspirations in this our paper of the energy policy regarding women. You know, there's a lot of words, women as key agents of change, promote and support women participation in decision-making, women entrepreneurship, and so on and so on. So based on the experiences in the monitoring of ADB projects, the usual practice is that this aspiration would stay as such. It is a misconception that gender inequality in the energy context is because of a lack of women access to clean and modern energy services. The extraction of energy sources like geothermal, biofuel, coal, among others, that triggered the loss of livelihood and natural resources, and the system that controls the energy business are actually the causes of gender inequality in the energy sectors. Moreover, ADB induced strategy of privatization, including electricity, power, and water, created the structural barriers for women's lack of energy access. So the new energy policy, if it is approved like this, shows that ADB failed to recognize these situations. So the question is, how will the energy policy dismantle its own created barriers as is stated in the policy? The new energy policy states also that it will consult women meaningfully, conduct gender analysis, collect sex disaggregated data to ensure gender mainstreaming throughout the project's cycle. You can see it in the paragraph 64. But you know, the reality, ADB fails to apply gender consideration in the Safeguard Policy Statement 2009. That's precisely about the participation of women and gender impact and assessment. So then how this new energy policy will ensure that this paragraph 64 will be implemented? So my last point is about the international communities that agree to leave the extraction high carbon part and go to the low carbon part. However, without structural change of the extractive mode, business as usual, the low carbon development part will have the same systematic exploitation and operation like what we are experiencing right now. So the ADB new energy policy doesn't show any transition from this mode of business as usual. We will have the same experience. Thank you, Vidya, for the time, and then I hand it over back to you.
Thank you, Titi, for making those very important points. I think gender mainstreaming cannot just be blah, blah, blah. It needs to find itself worked out on the ground. It needs to be in policies, in safeguards for energy policy, but how do you implement it? And it doesn't look like the ADB is serious. Thank you for making that important point. Also on geothermals, we move now to Tanya, who works to shift the ADB and AIIB energy policy and finance priorities away from large-scale, resource-intensive and fossil fuel-reliant options. For several years, Tanya has been part of community groups, NGOs, and social movements demanding accountability from financial institutions and transnational corporations for the damage and the injustice they have brought on local communities and ecosystems. Tanya completed an undergraduate degree in feminist studies, so you come out real nice after Titi, and on the politics of globalization in Canada, an MA in International Human Rights Law at the United Nations University for Peace in Costa Rica, and an LLM in Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights at the University of Essex School of Law in the UK. She right now is the campaign manager of the NGO Forum on ADB and pushes very passionately. Tanya, can you tell us more? Why should we reject this?
Thanks, Vidya. Well, I just want to start by saying that when the ADB's board of directors, each of whom represent the bank's member country governments, gather on October 20th to decide on whether or not to approve this energy policy, we are urging them to consider all of what they're hearing today and what the new policy will mean in practice. The policy provisions form the basis of what investments will be proposed and financed. So while we're acknowledging that the ADB suggests it will support borrowing member countries' plan for a just transition, this policy suggests that the aim of the bank's efforts in this regard are twofold, both of which are concerning. First of all, they are suggesting that their just transition would offer support for increasing opportunities associated with the transition. But what does this look like for the communities affected by the projects that would be approved under this policy? What we know is that what will be approved include waste to energy operations, large-scale dams, fossil gas and oil projects, financing for vastly expensive carbon capture ventures set up to decarbonize and offset fossil fuel projects. All of this under the banner of transition and universal access. In this case, whose opportunities are actually being increased? Not the people who are being dispossessed to make way for these projects, nor is it the people who will have to cope with the noxious fumes made by these projects, or those people who will be constantly wondering whether their homes will be contaminated by gas leaks and oil spills that will cause irreversible damage, or whether their livelihoods will be lost by the rivers being dammed upstream or downstream. Even the ADB's own independent evaluation department, as Vidya pointed out, has noted that the electricity and distribution lines, as well as other financing for connectivity infrastructure, such as pipelines and LNG terminals, would be classified as non-aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Secondly, the policy itself suggests that its aim would be to mitigate negative socioeconomic impacts in relation to just transition. But in light of their own energy sector portfolio, this would actually indicate a complete lack of foresight. Why not instead support non-resource intensive projects that meet the express needs of communities in the region, powered by the wind and the sun? Indeed, in the now final version of the policy, only once is there a reference to meeting the needs of last mile communities in the regions that remain unconnected to the main grids. And what is missing in their concept of just transition? First of all, and most concerningly, there are no assurances that the planning and implementation of at the national and local levels would be done in accordance with international frameworks and standards, including those put forward by the International Labour Organization. Nor are there provisions to ensure that planning processes are carried out with robust public consultation, inclusive of workers' organizations, Indigenous peoples groups, civil society groups, and more broadly, and many other types and many other communities. We also note with concern that the changes in the final version of the policy, in fact, promote much higher openings for the private sector and the use of financial intermediary loans, expanding electrification through boosting financing in areas such as small island developing states and conflict situations. And there are no provisions that are related to ring fencing in order to ensure that the investments are not financing further exposure to fossil fuels. Going forward, if this policy is approved as it stands, the ADB and the ADB board and the management can be assured that we as the civil society groups will be holding them accountable for the energy projects approved. Will they take a stand to develop robust screening criteria to ensure direct financing, including financing for transmission and distribution, and financial intermediary modalities are not Paris aligned? Will they take this opportunity to support locally relevant decentralized energy solutions where communities are actively engaged in decision-making processes to co-create and run the energy systems that will serve them? Or are they going to fall back into a position of business as usual, routinely ramping up support for large-scale energy infrastructure? We'll wait for that to be seen, but until then, we will continue, and beyond then, we'll continue to our advocacy. And back to you, Vidya.
Thank you, Tanya. Indeed, we will continue to push at the bank. There is no doubt that fossil fuels must be left in the ground. And ADB's claims of being the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific are really coming undone. As we move on, let me remind you to post your questions in the chat, and we will continue to bring you the lived realities of people who are affected by ADB's projects on the ground. And therefore, I go to Ikram from Central Asia. Ikram started his work on the environment back in 2003 as a volunteer in youth group on protection of the environment. And for the last 18 years has initiated and implemented more than 20 projects in Tajikistan on climate change, DRR, biodiversity, ecological and radiation safety, environmental monitoring and assessment, integration of Aarhus Convention, and the green economy principle. He has contributed to the strengthening of the youth movement, green patrols, increasing the role of the local population during the decision-making process, enhancing environmental justice, not just in Tajikistan, but also in most Central Asian countries in cooperation with international organizations. He's been awarded as one of the Central Asian youth ecological leaders in 2018. He is deputy of Istiklal, I think it is, city, 2015 to 20. He's a member of Public Council under the chairman of the Sukhet region. He is the international committee member of NGO Forum on ADB. And since 2016, he's been working as chairman of Youth Group on Protection of Environment. Ikram Mamadov.
Thank you very much, Vidya, and thank you for the previous speakers. I really appreciate the and highlighted during the discussion, and all the points highlighted before my speech was very important, and fully we support this position and statements from our colleagues. So in the same time, I want to take your attention some important points. Of course, that is very important for the developing countries. And I want to start my speech with a statement that there is no alternative to action, and the code is red. Climate change is widespread and rapid. Some trends could be irreversible according to the latest IPCC report released on August 2021. It's globally announced about the spending $15 trillion in stimulus since the pandemic began. About 4.6 trillion was spent directly on the sectors that have a large and lasting impact on the carbon emission and nature, like agriculture, industry, waste, energy, and transport. But less than 1.8 trillion has been green. It's only 12% of the total amount. According to the IMF rating for 2010, the average GDP per worldwide was about $21,000. 76 countries less than 10,000 per capita, while the top 20 countries more than $50,000 per capita. It means that not all countries have the opportunity to integrate alternative energy sources without external assistance, and supporting such countries by providing loans is extremely unfair, since such countries are much vulnerable to the climate change and have a limited budget. For example, the percentage of the electricity generated by the hydroelectric power station in Tajikistan is about 94%, in Kyrgyzstan 92%. The dependence of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan on the volume of the hydro resources and limited financial opportunities would not allow the rapid introduction of alternative energy sources until their support and enables this transition. Meanwhile, other Central Asia countries and Caucasus are really depending on the fossil fuels, since despite the available capacity, there is still an acute shortage of the electricity, especially in winter time. It's also necessary to consider the fact that all Central Asia and Caucasus countries are on their way to the development of industry, and it requires energy sources. Having limited possibilities for the development of the renewable energy sources, since countries focus on the mining of coal, other fossil fuels, because of this heavy reliance on the existing finite resources that will not last forever, and international community must help boosting on the energy transition rather than keeping us locking into our current situation. As a result, the ADB's energy policy should consider all possible factors that may negatively affect Central Asia and Caucasus countries. In particular, the policy should ensure a just transition and offer special conditions of support to the developing country within the detailed consideration of the local people. Since as a result, local people who already have no alternative are ones who may suffer the most. The second issue also concerns the interest of the people, since ADB with the framework of its new energy policy has opportunity to strengthen control over the implementation of all international norms and requirements to reduce environmental impact in the process of the project implementation, ensuring a just transition to alternative energy sources. Preventing negative impact on the environment is equal to the protection of the people's interests. And finally, on the access to the information. Unfortunately, despite several discussions, the issue of the access to the project is still at low level. For example, all 9 projects that are approved or are under consideration in 2021 in the energy sector of Central Asia countries have limited information and have not fully translated into local languages or to the Russian. In this regard, we believe that this state of the affairs does not meet ADB's requirements and principles. We urge ADB board members to reconsider approving its policy until its explicitly includes all details, assurance of the robust implementation of mechanisms where everyone could get an answer to the question how the financial will be used to support just transition in our communities. Many thanks. Your turn, Vidya.
Many thanks, Ikram. And I think we also need to realize that this policy does not make any firm commitments on how they will meet the electrification needs of last mile communities. It is an important perspective that you have brought from Central Asia. Thank you, Ikram, for that. And we will go on to Yobel Novian Putra, who is the Climate and Clean Energy Campaign Associate for Gaia, Asia Pacific. His interest in waste issues started from learning the history of a catastrophic landfill avalanche in his hometown, Bandung, in Indonesia. Later on, his interest transformed into a passion for learning about zero waste. Before joining Gaia, Yobel worked for 2 years as zero waste policy advocacy staff at YPBB Bandung, which is a local NGO which implemented a zero waste cities program since 2013. He's also been involved in Alliance Zero Waste Indonesia. Yobel graduated from the Institute Technology Bandung with a degree in environmental engineering. Yobel is known to state his piece very straight, especially to the ADB. Let's hear it from you, Yobel.
Thank you, Vidya. So, just to make it clear that the ADB should be ashamed to claim itself as a climate bank. Since last year, civil societies have been stating our clear demand to exclude waste-to-energy incinerator, or WTE, from its energy policy. Sadly, ADB has failed to acknowledge the science of waste incineration, which clearly shows that waste incineration is not a low-carbon investment. Studies have shown that WTE emits more carbon than coal-fired power plant, and it also costs more than coal-fired power plant per megawatt hour produced. It does not make sense to get coal-fired power plant phased out, yet the banks support WTE. In fact, WTE is 3 times more expensive than true renewable sources such as solar and wind. And this is why the EU has made waste incineration not eligible for any funding in all the latest definitions of granting measures such as Just Transition Fund, Regional Development and Cohesion Fund, and under EU taxonomy on sustainable financing. Other major IFIs such as European Investment Bank and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development also exclude waste incineration from their energy policies. And from the draft energy policy to its revised version, ADB is insistent to classify waste as renewable energy source. This conflicts with the IPCC directive, which states that only the organic component of municipal solid waste is considered renewable. Yet the policy considers the broad category of waste, which include fossil-based waste streams such as plastic, to be considered renewable. With fossil fuels running out of market, then plastic is the runaway for oil companies, especially in Asia, where the production is continuously increasing. clearly, waste to energy project means supporting continuous extraction of fossil fuel. And WTE is clearly neither low carbon nor renewable energy investment. It's not a climate solution, but ADB states this as part of their climate policy. There are at least 8 WTE projects listed as green bonds, blue bonds, and climate financing in Maldives, Marshall Islands, Vietnam, China, Thailand, and Uzbekistan. However, there are also technical assistance projects that are not listed there, such as the WTE project in the Philippines, where a national ban on waste incineration has already taken place for decades. It's even more concerning for small island countries like the Maldives and Marshall Islands, because WTE will only aggravate the climate impact of these countries that they are facing right now. We have been monitoring WTE projects in Cebu City of the Philippines and the Maldives, and found out that there were neither meaningful consultations nor transparent process for the local communities. And for the most expensive way to tackle the smallest portion of waste, which is the residual, the energy generation of WTE facility is very low. In fact, ADB management formally stated in their FAQ document that the energy generation potential of WTE is secondary. It's a byproduct. It's not an energy solution, but it's here in the energy policy. And the R paper states that WTE should follow the preconditions and holistically follow the order of priority, especially waste reduction, reuse, and recycling of materials. However, there is no clear mechanism to guarantee the implementation of this priority. ADB says that it will be reflected in the guidance note. However, they also say that the guidance note will not be made public, and there will be no public consultation on the guidance note. Without this, no one can ensure that this order of priority will be followed. And more importantly, the R paper states to commit to international convention as precondition. We demand that these should be reflected in the guidance note and also the safeguard policy, without integrating international standards and guidelines set forth by, for example, WHO on air quality, Basel Convention and Stockholm Convention, which regulates persistent organic pollutants produced by waste incinerator, also the ILO guidelines for a just transition, protecting green jobs, including those in the waste sector. Both the guidance note and the safeguard policy should reflect these preconditions, strengthen the preparatory process, including stakeholder consultation, institutional analysis, and waste analysis. Any project not meeting this precondition must not consider as ADB investment. So waste to energy is a waste of energy at global scale. It heats up our planet, wastes limited time and public money to avoid the worst climate emergency scenario of ecological collapse. ADB should be ashamed by the inclusion of waste to energy incineration in its financing policy and its ridiculous classification of fossil plastic as renewable energy sources. Thus, ADB is not worthy of the title of a climate bank. I'll stop there. Thank you, Vidya.
Thank you, Yobel. Very clearly put. And let's remind ourselves that they might tell us that this 2021 energy policy will be reviewed and revised within 5 years. But really, none of this is acceptable. Even 5 years of this nonsense is something that we will not take. We have one more intervention and then a wrap after that. So let me call upon Toshi Doi from Mekong Watch. He's currently senior advisor with Mekong Watch, a Tokyo-based advocacy NGO. Over the past 25 years, Toshi has been monitoring the impacts of development finance in the Mekong region, particularly on local communities' access to natural resources. His research interests include policies and practices of multilateral development banks, such as the Asian Development Bank and others, and the revitalization of languages, culture, and traditions of indigenous people in Asia. Toshi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vija. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'd also like to contest ADB's claim to be the climate bank. Why? Because its new energy policy still supports false solutions to climate crisis. My colleagues including Yobo, my previous speaker, have already pointed out some, but I have yet to single out two more false solutions based on my own experiences with the Mekong River Basin and Japan. First is large-scale hydropower. Large hydro is not clean or sustainable. In fact, large hydro reduces resilience to climate crisis. Large hydro messes up a natural cycle of rivers and interferes with fish migration and nutrition flows. It damages natural resources which are sustainably used for and are indispensable to lives and livelihoods of many local riverine communities, which include women, children, elderlies, indigenous peoples, and other minorities. One Mekong fisher, whose livelihood was threatened by a large hydro project, said, "We can eat fish, but we cannot eat electricity." His statement captures the essence of the problem. Large hydro creates a contradiction between food security and energy access. But it is an unnecessary contradiction. We just have to say goodbye to large hydro and go with more decentralized, pro-poor, and climate-friendly energy options. ADB's persistence with large hydro is really disturbing to me because ADB should learn by now how ecologically and economically unsustainable large hydropower is. The bank has been aggressively pushing the Greater Mekong Subregion or GMS program, which has been promoting large hydro. In fact, more than that, the GMS program has funded a power grid, transmission lines, and energy trade schemes, which have attracted many, actually more than one can handle, large hydropower projects, not only of ADB's own, but also those of regional governments and multinational corporates. In terms of impact to climate crisis, large hydro reservoirs also emit significant amounts of greenhouse gases, particularly methane, which contributes much to climate crisis. The new energy policy says that ADB will support large hydropower schemes that have been evaluated in a robust environmental and social assessment. However, based on my own experiences of watching ADB policies and practices for decades, the devil is always in implementation. ADB is the institution which lacks the capabilities of fully complying with its own policies without close monitoring of the civil society. However, as our media friends here are well aware of, and this is very unfortunate, but civil society space has been shrinking in Southeast Asia and globally. Thus, it makes me very nervous when ADB still tries to support large hydro and other large-scale infrastructure projects. Also, compared to the previous earlier draft, the new policy, our paper, has very conveniently removed some language related to cumulative impact assessment and independent experts' involvement in designing and implementing large hydro. This is quite alarming. I could go on, but I still need to mention very quickly a second false solution in the ADB's policy, which is nuclear energy. The new policy characterizes nuclear energy as low carbon, but this characterization is misleading. Why? Because nuclear energy means not just power generation, but also involves other unsustainable activities like uranium mining, regular maintenance of power plants, and waste storage and management. These activities expose miners and workers to radiation risks. There is no viable technology to manage radioactive waste. It is unsustainable and unjust to pass on unmanageable nuclear waste to our children, grandchildren, and those yet to be born. Last but not least, nuclear energy is very risky. One should only be reminded of the nuclear explosions in Fukushima, Japan, back in 2011. After more than 10 years, much of the area is still under the government's declaration of state of emergency. Thousands of survivors still live in temporary housing. For all these risks, nuclear energy, even analyzing it for energy planning, as ADB says, is a mere distraction. ADB should use its limited resources to look into already available more sustainable and affordable energy options. At this point, my recommendation and conclusion for ADB is quite simple. If ADB genuinely wants to be the climate bank, remove, I say again, remove any support for large hydro and nuclear energy from its new energy policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toshi. Clearly, we all need to echo what you said. Goodbye to large hydropower projects, to myriad false solutions, to fossil fuel investments, to waste to energy incinerators, and to disastrous nuclear energy projects. Yes to renewables, yes to listening to the communities, yes to listening to the women, no to illegitimate debts that pile up in Asian countries because of these projects and policies. Let me come to our final speaker. And just before I do, let me remind all our participants that you can put your questions or comments in the chat. Ryan Hassan is born Bangladeshi and now international, and is the current executive director of the NGO Forum on ADB. He has a background in environmental studies and a master's in social change and development. He's currently pursuing a doctorate in political science at the University of the Philippines, just as he oversees the Forum Network and its campaign. As a civil society advocate, he regularly engages policymakers of the ADB and the AIIB and their major stakeholders, their major shareholders in different countries. He brings community issues to the forefront of the development debate. That's his forte. Through the support and guidance of the Forum's International Committee, he continues to forge new alliances and implement campaigns with civil society groups at the local, regional, and global level. His work in the Forum remains steadfast in underscoring the importance of environmental and social justice and holding international financial institutions accountable. Ryan Hassan.
Thank you, Vidya. You read out the entire bio from the website.
I did.
Thank you. Sometimes it's good to hear it all. Well, there's nothing new to add after those excellent inputs from everyone. And thanks to Toshi, the previous speaker, to bring the critical issue of large hydro up to the forefront that usually gets sort of crowded out during the fossil fuel arguments. The truth be told, we've been, as NGO Forum on ADB, engaging this policy review process throughout the first lockdown and the opening sequence of the global pandemic. And such an important policy to be reviewed while the entire world is shut down on a lockdown process, that in itself tells you how transparent and inclusive their original intentions were in reviewing this very critical policy. Has there been any improvement? I guess years and decades of struggle by NGO Forum and wider civil society has led to a coal exclusion in this R paper, and that's worth recognizing. But that coal exclusion, even though hard fought, comes at a great cost. All the other criteria which have been identified still remain. So what we are really noticing is you've got a $263 trillion global debt. You've got borrowing governments really backs to the wall, taking on stimulus packages to sort of survive the pandemic and then reopen the economy if possible. And nothing's ever the same after this. And within all this, you're expecting the Asian Development Bank to be a meaningful partner in that recovery. And unfortunately, what the bank is thinking is, how do I survive with my corporate and institutional interests in this very crippling global economy? And unfortunately, the ADB energy policy is a way to sustain ADB's own existence through repackaging the language, which seems on the outset something which is climate aligned, but allows every single sector of financing to go through, which it has already done before in connectivity, in transport, and in energy. Yes, they had to admit to the fact that stringent criteria have to be incorporated, and that's the battleground up ahead. But the truth be told, they will finance baseload gas power plants. They are going to finance large hydro. They can finance coal through financial intermediaries, so it's not a complete exclusion. So all these loopholes remain, which leads you to the question that on October 20th, when the ADB board of directors are going to vote on this policy, they are going to vote on it, but that means this policy comes into existence, and ADB's greenwashing propaganda machine over the last 2 years on this policy will have come to an end, and they're going to showcase this for COP26 in the climate conference as their great achievement in terms of a new policy. The truth is, it is not a new policy. And they're backing it up with increasing a $100 billion climate finance portfolio. In 2018, in the Fiji annual meeting, ADB said it was going to be $85 billion up to 2030. They increased it by another 15 billion. I think APMDD pointed that out in the earlier input. And if you look at that carefully, 30 to 40 billion is being earmarked for the private sector for low carbon investment opportunities. And that's on the ADB website. If you just search ADB 100 billion climate finance. Now, private sector operations are there for private interests. And ADB is putting 40% of its climate finance portfolio in private hands. And we have seen how that worked out in the Tata Mundra coal power plant. We have seen how that worked out with the Summit Group of Industries in Bangladesh and the LNG portfolio. So these are very, very worrisome signals. And I do believe that it requires more vigilance. And we cannot end up thinking that ADB is a monolithic, powerful institution. The truth be told, the sovereign governments remain as the most important stakeholder in the development debate. And if it is Asian energy future and climate future which is at stake, then the onus is upon our governments to get the right projects financed and not accept these top-down development expert type solutions of what should be in our energy policy and in our energy future. So our friends from the press who are here, our friends from civil society who are here, all of us should reorient our hats of movement and advocacy and really start thinking about what is it that we need to get financed and what is it that we need to derail away from. I do not think ADB is the only financier in the energy space in the region. There are other banks as well. So the options to go towards liquidity and credit are more viable, but that means we need to get our voices amplified. We need to get our national development agenda brought back to the people's agenda. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time. The global temperature cannot be restricted to 1.5, according to the IPCC AR6 report. We are heading towards a 2 degrees Celsius future. Longer summers, shorter winters, massive climate disturbances, a lot of storms, a lot of pressure on our agriculture and our food security systems. So this is not going to be an easy task. And I think the question, while we may not have the answers now, but the battleground for the question is what is development on the ground and what is needed. we've realized public health infrastructure was needed, or the virus would not have spread this much. Now we are realizing inequality is a serious problem. Local debt, local people's debt, and how they survive the pandemic and how they can get their jobs back is as important as the climate crisis. So even when the northern climate movements are telling us, let's shift away from fossil fuels tomorrow, that's not going to happen, because you have to make sure each and every single person working in a baseload power plant gets a job. So we have to be very careful as groups from the South, not only within civil society and the climate campaign, but any kind of prescriptive development agenda which is coming from the outside has to be questioned. By listening to everyone outside, we ended up here. And this is not where we're going to survive. So we have to create our own solutions. I request everyone to think deeply about the work that we do, because there's a lot of work ahead and time is running out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, for that gloom and doom picture, which is really the reality that we are now in. This is the time for questions and also, of course, deep reflections. The ADB might point to developer member countries. Developing member countries means it's us. The onus is on us, those in civil society, those on the ground, and the press, to really prop up our countries and their commitments towards seeing that we keep to the 1.5 target, which is already, as Ryan said, looking very difficult to keep to. Do we have any questions? It doesn't have to be from a member of the press. It can be from anyone here. We'd be happy to take questions. All our speakers are here. So it's policies that we have to look into. We know that, as Ryan said, ADB is not the only bank in the region, but it is an important bank, and Asian governments like the Indian government or the Bangladeshi government and all governments across Asia do listen very keenly to what the ADB is saying. It influences our domestic policy and how we conduct business. 40% for the private players. So there's lots that we need to be very, very vigilant about. We appeal to members of the press to please carry all the ideas and the concerns that have been expressed in today's press conference, because the board of directors that is going to sit on the final draft of the Energy Policy 2021 need to be cognizant of all these concerns when they sit down on the 20th of October, so that we can hope, just hope, that we have a better policy than what is now the final policy before the public. Even for 5-6 years, this is not acceptable. If there are no more questions, then shall we say goodbye to each other and focus on the work that is very much at hand. We continue to push. We are writing to the ADB. We are writing to all the board of directors. And we hope that today and tomorrow, the press will also support this push. Thank you. Thank you to all the media friends who came. And of course, your work is also cut out for you, for our collective future, I guess. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Vidya.
Thank you, Vidya.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vidya. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all the speakers.